The Indianapolis Colts went 9-8 last season. They were a Jacksonville Jaguars upset away from making it into the playoffs. When you look at the Indianapolis Colts, this team has a pretty solid offensive line. I don't think their offensive line is as good as what a lot of people make it out to be, but it's solid. I think it's a top 12, top 11 unit in the NFL going into this year. Your wide receiver position still, doesn't really impress me all that much. You do have Michael Pittman, who is coming off a breakout season. I'm interested in seeing what Alex Pierce does in his rookie year. But we already know that this offense is going to run through the J Train, aka Jonathan Taylor. Now, you replace Carson Wentz with Matt Ryan. And there are a good amount of people out there who believe that Indianapolis somewhat downgraded at quarterback. And the reason for this is because, unlike Carson Wentz, you don't get no mobility out of Matt Ryan. And I can understand that. However, Matt Ryan is more accurate as a passer compared to Carson Wentz. And on top of that, he takes better care of the football than Carson Wentz, which is the main thing that Indianapolis is looking for. There were too many times last season late in games when Carson Wentz would cost Indianapolis games due to boneheaded decisions and just being flat out reckless. So with Matt Ryan, although you do have a quarterback who's on the older end of the spectrum and his playing days are now starting to come to a close, you still do have somebody who's more than capable of being able to win you games and get you to the playoffs. And it's not as if Indianapolis needs Matt Ryan to play at an MVP level or anything like that. They just need him to be a game manager at this point, take care of the football, make the necessary big throws when need to. And this offense is pretty much going to be ran through Jonathan Taylor. And this defense should still be pretty good. You have a pretty good defensive line with DeForest Buckner. You had Yannick Ngakoue there. You got Kwity Paye. You got Darius Leonard, arguably one of the best defensive players in the NFL. You had Stephon Gilmore, so your secondary is still going to be pretty good. However, will your defense remain elite with your former defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus becoming the head coach of the Chicago Bears? You are going to be replacing him with Gus Bradley, who was the defensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders in 2021. And the Las Vegas Raiders had a very good defense under Gus Bradley. I won't say it was elite. It wasn't top 10, but it was pretty good. And their defense did show up on a couple of occasions, and they were a pretty good part of why the Las Vegas Raiders were able to have that late season run in December and January and why they were able to get into the playoffs. So for Indianapolis, my best case scenario for them is going to be 11-6. Now, the offensive line does have some really good pieces. Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Brandon Smith are some of the best players at their respective positions on the offensive line. Okay, at wide receiver, you're going to have Paris Campbell coming back fully healthy. But also, a wide receiver to keep your eyes on is Isaiah Ford. This was somebody who has spent the majority of his career with the Miami Dolphins. And he's been a really underrated player in a sense because he always has really good training camp outings, really good in the preseason. But when it comes to the regular season, he just doesn't get a lot of opportunity. So if Isaiah Ford could end up starting at slot receiver for Indianapolis, I definitely feel like you could get some really good production out of him there. But if Paris Campbell can stay healthy, he's also pretty good. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Michael Pittman is coming off a breakout season. Your defense still is going to be really good. And the division isn't really all that tough. Jacksonville is going to be slightly better. Houston could be slightly better. They're still not really going to be all that great. Tennessee is a toss-up between the Colts and the Titans. But overall for Indianapolis, I could see 11 wins. However, I feel like the floor for Indianapolis is 7-10. How is your left tackle situation going to play out? Last season, Eric Fisher started the majority of games for you there. I don't really know how productive that position is going to be for them this year. On defense, you lost Matt Eberflus. Could the defense potentially regress under defensive coordinator Gus Bradley? And on top of that, you look at Indianapolis' schedule, and It's not really all that difficult. You know, you start your first two games of the regular season on the road against Houston and Jacksonville, but then you get to play Kansas City and Tennessee, then Denver at home. So that's going to be a pretty tough 3-game stretch. Then during the middle waypoint of the season, you go on the road to Foxborough and Las Vegas. Then you have Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Dallas coming off a bye. You got Minnesota and the Chargers there. So that's going to be a pretty tough slate once you get into the latter half of the season. And that's where we start to see the pretenders separate themselves from the contenders. And if Indianapolis is going to make a playoff run, they're going to have a stretch of the year when they're going to be facing 5 to 6 playoff teams back to back to back in consecutive weeks. And I wonder just how this team is going to hold up there, because you don't really have a lot of great talent at wide receiver outside of Michael Pittman, and you do have some concerns at left tackle there. So my overall record prediction for Indianapolis is going to be 8-9. I just feel like when you look at Indianapolis, you know, I mean, they're a solid team, but the AFC is crowded. You know, are you going to be able to beat a team like the Chargers or a team like Kansas City, a team that has a lot of explosive firepower? Because when you're going to be able to beat some of these teams, you have to be able to put up a good amount of points. And this offense is okay, but I mean, is Matt Ryan going to be able to, you know, have some games where he can carry you if the run game isn't there? And is this defense still going to consistently be able to play at a high-end level under a new defensive coordinator? You know, these are the questions that I have about Indianapolis. And although their division isn't really tough, I don't really feel like there's too much separation between them and Tennessee, which is why I have both of these two teams finishing with the same record. I feel like this division is going to be really unwatchable at times. I don't really think Indianapolis is just this great team. You know, it's like with quarterback of Matt Ryan, I like Matt Ryan. He still is more than capable of being able to get you to the postseason, but there are going to be some games where you're going to have to rely on him to win with his arm, and you just wonder how he's going to hold up. So 8-9 is my record prediction for the Indianapolis Colts. Let me know how you guys feel about Indianapolis down in the comment section down below.